Bethesda has completely ruined Fallout, turning it from an excellent, story-driven, pointed look at society, war, politics, and nuclear Armageddon into a generic first-person shooter with Minecraft elements, because they thought that was still relevant in 2015, much less today. But don't worry, you can play a shitty VR version of the game now too! Yay! That'll surely fix the core issues with Bethesda games. Oh wait, it's a terrible port that's made people sick, whoops. We can't rely on Bethesda giving us good Fallout games, especially if they're not going to let Obsidian make any more, so we must instead turn to indie developers. Regular viewers of this channel may remember one such fan-made game we covered last week, funded via Kickstarter. That game is Atom RPG, and today we're taking a look at its early access release. Bear in mind this game did just release into early access only a couple of weeks ago, and it's far from a final product. That's something that becomes very apparent the more you play, but we'll come on to that. Let's start with some of the things the game does right. It's clearly nailed the Fallout aesthetic with its top-down camera, UI elements, and dialogue presentation. It looks like a modern-day Fallout game, at least in terms of that presentation, and that's all fine and dandy. There's also the same survival stuff you'd find in the older Fallout games, which is to say that managing your thirst, hunger, and sleep is compulsory. You also have to keep an eye on your radiation levels as well, as you'd expect from modern Fallout. One of the things I especially like about this game is that it doesn't hold your hand, which is often used as a cheap marketing buzzword for developers, but it's something that rings true here. You're robbed at the very start of the game, leaving you with pretty much nothing but an empty canteen and a vague idea of what you're supposed to be doing. The rest is completely up to you. The game doesn't really keep track of your quests, telling you only the top-level objective, leaving you to figure out what to do next, where to go, and even remembering what you're supposed to be doing at any given time. It also doesn't gift you with any free weapons or items, and you can't just go around robbing people blind to get better gear and earn a ton of money. You have to earn everything the hard way, and make no mistake, it is difficult. Some people, well, a lot of people probably won't like this. They probably won't like the fact that it doesn't keep track of quests for you and that it leaves you in such a bad starting point, but I really enjoy it. I feel like modern games are a bit too lenient with how they give you so many free things, especially modern Fallout, when it's supposed to be like a desolate wasteland and everything's terrible and run down, but it's okay because you have all this money and medical supplies and weapons and stuff. This game is not like that. This game, you're just given a vague idea what you're supposed to do, that empty canteen, and told, alright, good luck, buddy boy, and sent off. And I really respect that in a way. Aside from that, it's the typical Fallout thing, really the typical RPG thing. You wander around a desolate wasteland interacting with communities and finding enemies, you pick stuff up and you put it in your inventory, you get experience points and level up, all that kind of stuff. It's a turn-based game too, just like the older Fallouts, which I've personally never been a fan of, but you can't have it all, I guess. You've also got tons of side quests, can speak to every NPC you come across, companions, and plenty of player choice. If you've played really any RPG in the last few years, it's gonna be kinda standard stuff to you. The main story is pretty vague. The lore follows real history for the most part, including the fall of the Soviet Union. Only instead of the Soviet Union actually falling, it instead just kinda started a nuclear war with the United States. It's now 2005, which is one way it differentiates itself from Fallout by not being set hundreds of years after nuclear annihilation. There are still people alive from back then who knew what the world used to be like. There's a society going around helping people called Atom. I guess they're similar to the followers of the apocalypse, and you're one of these members. What always made Fallout stand out, though, was the writing, the characters that emerged from it, and the emphasis on player choice. It's hard to see at times, but Atom RPG flashes some of that same brilliance. You're part of the Atom Society, and you've been sent alone to track down one of the faction's leaders who's gone missing, as well as tracking down a mysterious bunker. You're not given much other than that to go on, so you have to use your own detective skills to figure it out. Without spoiling too much, there's a quest early on in the game in which you're asked by a mayor of a town to find a spy who's working for a nearby group of bandits. These bandits rob the town, but aside from killing some armed mercenaries, they don't ever seem to do much else. When you eventually find the spy, you end up meeting these bandits and find out that it's not quite as cut and dry as the town folks will have you believe. There's no black and white morality like you'd find in a Bethesda Fallout game. And also something you wouldn't find in a modern Bethesda Fallout game is the ability to complete the quest in multiple ways. Yes, you can side with either the town or the bandits, sure, but there are a plethora of options in between. It's because of this, and the other quests like it, that I feel like, at its core, Atom RPG has the makings of a great game. The problem is, it can sometimes be really hard to see it. The first thing you're probably gonna notice when you start the game up is that the writing itself kind of leaves a lot to be desired. If you saw our episode of Kicked on the game, you'll know that the developers are from Latvia, so English isn't their first language. The Kickstarter page was full of bad translations, grammatical errors, and typos, and unfortunately that carries over to the game as well. In fact, the opening paragraphs from the Kickstarter, the one that says, "The deteriorations and relations between Eastern and Western blocks in the 1979, yeah, that one, is exactly the same as the opening text in the game. They haven't changed or fixed it in any way. And overall, the translation is just awful. An editor who speaks English as a first language, or at least better than the developers, really needs to go over each and every line to get the most out of it. Now, that's not to say it's Google Translate bad, far from it. Some of the lines are barely passable, some contain simple spelling or grammatical errors, and some of the lines are just downright awful. This would be bad for any game, but for a narrative-driven game with no voice acting, hoping to compete with Fallout, it is a huge problem, and I'm not sure if they're planning to fix it. I'm seeing the exact same errors as I saw in the original gameplay videos from the Kickstarter, and in a closed beta played by the YouTuber Miniature Nerd way back in May. Cleaning up this translation really needs to be a priority, but they haven't really shown any signs of doing that. The dialogue itself can be wonky too, and I'm not just talking about in terms of translation. At the start of the game, when you're getting robbed, I tried to use speech to get them to leave me alone. The game said I was successful, but they knocked me out and robbed me anyway. When I got to the starting town, I asked a bartender if he had any jobs for me. He said no, but then gave me a job anyway after I tried to walk away. Incidentally, he asked me to pick up a book he ordered from a nearby town, and seconds later I ran into a mailman delivering mail from that town. Why couldn't the bookstore owner just have mailed it? And that spy you're sent to find who infiltrated the town? He confessed to me after talking to him for just 2 seconds, without any speech checks or anything. I just said, "Do you know who the spy is?" He looked at me shiftily and said, "Why?" I said, "I'd like to join," and he said, "Okay." That was literally it. That was the entire thing. And the Kickstarter page makes a big deal about how playing as a female character will drastically alter how NPCs interact with you, but I played a couple of hours as both male and female characters, and didn't really notice any difference. I'm not saying there is no difference, just that I didn't notice anything, which is a real shame. The basic controls aren't great either, which is something I realize I've said in every single review video we've posted so far, but it's true. You move with point-and-click controls, which just feels archaic and old-fashioned, made worse by the camera that's just too close. You don't get a good view of the world, it's really zoomed in onto your character for some reason. You can't get a good view of your surroundings, so you're constantly scrolling the camera forward and backward across the map, clicking to where you want to go, while your character is miles away, and there's no way to recenter the camera on your character either, so you could run into enemies or other obstacles and not realize it, and have to spend ages trying to find where your character is. They should just switch to WASD movement and be done with it. You know, I don't really have a whole lot else to say about the game in its current state. I'd rather save most of it for the full review of the final game, whenever that happens to be. Because it is so desperately trying to emulate Fallout, it's hard to kind of think of something new to say about it, because it is so much like the old Fallout games, for better or for worse. There are a few things I'd like to see happen, though. I say this with every indie story-driven game, but I do think that voice acting could do a lot of good for this game. We saw recently with A Hat in Time how voice acting added a nice layer to the characters with how they chewed the scenery and pulled you into the plot when there really wasn't much of a plot at all there. Imagine if they were voice acting here in a game full of dialogue and characters. I just think it could really add a lot, provided the voice acting was good, of course. I also really just wish the game were in third person with real-time combat, not this top-down turn-based stuff. It's just always a pain when you randomly miss your attacks for no reason and have to just stand there for ages fighting a single enemy. But that just comes down to personal preferences, and that would totally change the game anyway, and I'm not sure how many people would be up for that, but whatever, maybe the option for it, I don't know. Clearly there is still a lot of work to be done between fixing the existing issues and continuing to add features and areas. I mean, there are several areas in this game that you can't access still because the game says it's not finished and it's in beta and yada yada yada. If you're interested, honestly, I'd say you should probably wait, if not until the final game is out, at least a few more months for some of the more major issues to be addressed. Still, the foundation here is solid. If the developers are willing to take the feedback and make the necessary changes, the developers could have something truly special here. Right now, I think it's too early to see how this will end up going. They could make some drastic changes to it and make this the great game it deserves to be, or they could just not do that and it continues to just be okay with a lot of potential. Either way, I'm going to be keeping a close eye on this one, and I suggest you do too.